Okay, I'm going to start now. So, what we're doing today is I sent out the 2017 paper for people to do. I know from, I think all of you sitting in this class did it. So, I went through your papers. I'll send you guys your marks afterwards. Everyone did well, looking at trial marks and looking at what you guys got in this paper. Everyone did very well in the comprehension. The language, everyone did well. The weak point for everyone in this one was the summary. So, I'll show you guys why everyone did badly in the summary. It was a very tough summary, but let's start with the comprehension first. Okay, so with the comprehension, right? We, like I said, when I was talking about the comprehension, when I had that first class, always rather focus on writing too much than writing too little, right? That was the main point that I had for the comprehension. So if you see here, right, let's just read through it. So first, we're going to go paragraph by paragraph. We're going to look at what the main point in each paragraph is. And then you can just write it down somewhere on the side of each paragraph. For those of you who did the paper, please make corrections next to the questions that you got wrong. Like you'll hear it now when I explain it to you where you went wrong. And you'll see, but a majority of you did very well in this comprehension. So, cultural appropriation. In sections of the media concerned with representation and social justice, it seems we can barely endure a week without a newsworthy incident about cultural appropriation. While examples of cultural appropriation can be found in just about any cultural facet or artifact, the true complexity of cultural appropriation is often not truly appreciated or sufficiently articulated. Okay, so paragraph one basically just introduced what this entire thing was about. So cultural appropriation is the way we accept different cultures. It's the aspects of the elements, so to say. They mention it in the next paragraph where they explain it to you about a certain culture and how it relates to, for example, indigenous people. So, okay, majority of the time you're going to see question one is going to come from the first paragraph, right? So you can see that here also it works. State in your own words the point the writer is making in paragraph one, right? So basically, all the writer is trying to tell us here is you can see the word media, right? That first sentence is what you're going to look at for a key point. Question one is almost always this. So you're always going to look at your first sentence to get the main idea and gauge what this is about. So we can see words like media, representation, social, and newsworthy, right? So that immediately tells us, obviously, we're looking at something to do with the media. And then obviously the main topic is cultural appropriation. So all we're going to say for question 1.1 is cultural appropriation is a popular topic in the media. It's a complex issue. It's not fully discussed and it's not fully understood. Because you can see here, not fully appreciated or sufficiently articulated. All you have to do was convert this first paragraph into your own words, basically, and you'd have scored your full 2 there. I'll show you guys the memo answer here about how they wrote it. There, exactly like that. Cultural appropriation is a popular topic in the media. So, like they say, you can see award 2 marks for any 1 point. So all you have to do was take any point, basically, any sentence from this first paragraph and convert it into your own words. So just use one synonym for something in there, and that was 2 marks. So I think that was an easy question. I think everyone that I marked got that right. That was 2 out of 2, right? Then someone's just trying to join. Okay, I'm going to continue. So all we did so far was question 1.1. Question 1.2. Provide an outline of the argument presented by the writer in paragraph 2. So obviously now we're focusing on paragraph 2. We're going to look at paragraph 2. You're going to see cultural appropriation involves the use of one's cultural elements by a group or individual. The link not work earlier. I see everyone's trying to join now. What's that? Okay. But yeah, we're on question 1.2, guys. So this is from the 2017 paper for those that just joined now. Cultural appropriation involves the use of one's culture elements by a group or individual that does not belong, right? So right from the start of that paragraph, the first thing they're telling us is what cultural appropriation is, right? Then, however, that's a shift in the paragraphs. It's telling us this definition is lacking because such an interaction may be labeled simply as cultural exchange. And that argument would be difficult to defeat because, firstly, who owns a culture? And secondly, borrowing from one culture and lending to another has been a way of the world since human society began. Right? So for question 1.2, quite a few people got this wrong. If you look here, they're telling us provide an outline of the argument. Guys, an argument compares two things to each other, right? So what's the two things we're comparing here? We're looking at cultural appropriation and then we're looking at cultural exchange. So one of your marks was purely stating that lots of people got this wrong when I looked at the paper. People were writing completely different stuff here. You had to speak about how cultural appropriation is one thing and cultural exchange is a different thing and how the writer's trying to explain to us the difference between the two. Then all you have to do is say what cultural appropriation is, what cultural exchange is, and then you add your full 2 marks there. So I'll show you guys how it was written in the memo again. The writer distinguishes between cultural appropriation and cultural exchange. There's that there again. Cultural appropriation is the unauthorized use of elements of another culture, whereas cultural exchange refers to the borrowing. So what you have to say here is unauthorized and then borrowing. That was the two key words that you had to focus on for the differences. And your 1 mark was stating that in this paragraph, the writer is trying to define the difference between the two. So whenever you see the word argument, immediately look for two key points in the paragraph that the writer is trying to compare to each other. And like I said, obviously the questions go in order of the comprehension. You guys are the A class, you guys know this already, but just emphasizing it again. So then you'll say, refer to paragraph 3, explain the role that power plays in cultural appropriation. Right, let's go read paragraph 3. So paragraph 3 is a short paragraph, right? So chances are this answer is not going to be too long because you're looking at it, right? It's 2 marks. Obviously, your answer is not going to be longer than the entire paragraph if they're telling you to look at the paragraph. So I saw one person wrote like half a page for this one here. This one here, you didn't have to go into as much detail. So what makes cultural exchange different from cultural appropriation? As with most points of cultural contention, the difference is power. Someone trying to join? Think they're in. Okay. So what makes cultural exchange different from cultural appropriation? As with most points of cultural contention, the difference is power. In particular, the power of the privilege to borrow and normalize a culture, a cultural element of another group, while the group whose culture has been appropriated is often demonized and excluded because of that very cultural element. Right, so what are they asking us in this question? So all they're asking us is explain the role that power plays in cultural appropriation. Like I said, this one's going to be a short one. So all you need to say is that this paragraph, basically what they're telling us is the power, so we're going to look here, the power of the privileged. The privileged is typically the more wealthy people, right? That's how we're going to look at that. So we're going to have to speak about how the wealthy people take control of the different cultural elements, right? So it's very straightforward. I'll show you guys here how they wrote it in the memo. This was a straightforward question, was another one that majority got right. All you had to say was the wealthy. I know lots of people just wrote it as the powerful people take control. They would have given it to you because here you can see it's an option between wealthy or powerful. All you had to say is they take control of the cultural elements. They would have given you 2 marks for that 1 point. You didn't have to explain or anything. That one was a straightforward one. But like I said, if you're not sure, write more. Because like I'm telling you, one person wrote like half a page for this. And while yes, they wrote a lot more than you needed to write, this right answer was in there at some point. I think it was like their 4th sentence or something. And they still scored their full 2 marks, even though they clearly weren't sure of the answer, but they got it right. Question 1.4. Refer to paragraph 4. How do celebrities influence the perception of cultural appropriation? Right, let's go look at paragraph 4. A recent example of cultural appropriation is the wearing of hairstyles, right? That has nothing to do with celebrities. From cornrows and Senegalese twists to knots and dreadlocks, which are rooted in the African diaspora, and many of which have been a part of African culture's heritage for centuries, right? Still not much to do with celebrities there in that part. Then we're going to look, black hairstyles in the current culture have been deemed fashionable by celebrities. So when they're telling us something appears fashionable, right? That, in other words, means it's celebrities who's trying to popularize the specific aspect. So they're making it acceptable to wear these type of hairstyles in, like, because of the way they portray themselves through different newspaper articles, for example, magazines, interviews that they do with them. So all you had to do here was they're saying what impact basically did celebrities have on cultural appropriation and the accepting of different cultures. Celebrities make cultural appropriation acceptable and fashionable. Their popularity aroused them to shape perceptions that are not acceptable. Right? Was here again, it was any 2 marks for 1 point. So if you just wrote celebrities make cultural appropriation acceptable and fashionable, you'd have got it. With English, you don't have to go exactly as the memo edit. Like many of you didn't speak about, like for example, didn't use the word acceptable, but you used the word fashionable. If you had the word celebrities in there at some point and you had the word fashionable in there at some point, your marker's going to give it to you. Because it's 2 marks for 1 point. So they're not asking you for detail and not asking for your own opinion. All you have to do is put there the main key point. And if you had those 2 words somewhere in your explanation, you would have gotten the full 2 marks. Question 1.5. Suggest why the writer includes the aside thanks but no thanks in line 32. Okay, let's go look for line 32. So line 32, the sentence from line 32 starts on line 30, right? While West Africans themselves often debate who makes the best rice, many all over the diaspora took to the internet to reject Jamie Oliver's recipe and let him know, thanks, but no thanks. Right. So now, what does the sentence mean, thanks, but no thanks? Basically, what they're telling us is it's almost a sarcastic tone. So one of the marks in this one here, all you had to state was it's sarcastic, right? Because obviously when someone's saying thanks, but no thanks, we know how we use this in our everyday language, right? We know the effect of it. So Jamie Oliver is, this one here was a bit of your own knowledge you have to incorporate. Jamie Oliver is a popular foreign chef, and they're speaking about West African dishes. But obviously, Jamie Oliver is not African. So that was the irony and the, so to say, how would you word it? You could almost say the sarcastic tone of this, because they're telling you that many people are accepting him as an expert on this thing, right? But he has nothing to do with it because he's not even West African. Just look at how the memo worded it. The writer uses strong, the writer is dismissive of sarcastic towards, right? That's 1 point. You'd have gotten the 1 mark. Like I said, just remember sarcasm when you see a phrase like that. And the West Africans' jealousy guards their recipes, and it should be their right to make them internationally popular. And there's the point I spoke about. A foreign chef should not be appropriating their dishes. So here, for this one here, you would have either got 3 marks for the 3 different ideas. So one idea would have been the sarcasm. One idea would have been West Africans guarding their own recipe. Or you could have just spoke about the chef as a whole and the sarcasm aspect of it and just explained it a bit in detail, and you would have got your full 3. With question 1.6, how does the language used in paragraph 6 indicate the writer's attitude to cultural appropriation? Right, let's go look at paragraph 6. So when they ask you about, this one here was about language, right? We're going to go look at specific phrases from paragraph 6. So where would we look here? For those speaking from positions of power, the idea of cultural appropriation, nothing in that line. The next line also doesn't have much. Here's a strong wording, right? In everything from cultural annihilation, right? Cultural annihilation is obviously strong, and loss to colonization, right? That's another one. So here he's almost critiquing the different aspects of cultural appropriation. So for this one here, we would have had to, you have to almost state how, in this paragraph, what is the main aim of the writer, right? He's trying to, so to say, I'm trying to think of a simple way to explain this. He wants to show you how important culture is to people. And then he wants to, if you read here further on, he speaks about a specific, this fact is certainly lost on a novelist, right? Lionel Shriver, who recently gave one of the most culturally tone-deaf speeches at the Brisbane Festival. So I'll show you guys how the memo worded it for this one. This one here was a lot about, all you had to do was make sure that you had the right attitude. So you had to say it was strong and assertive, right? That was obviously 1 point. Like I said, there you could have used the example of cultural annihilation. That would have given you 1 and 2 points, because you would have got your 1 point for stating it's assertive, and you would have got another point for the cultural annihilation point. And then we spoke about criticism to display his criticism or rejection of the practice. He acknowledges the importance of culture. We spoke about that as well. So you can see here, for this one here, there's a lot that you could have written, right? They would have typically have given you a mark for, maybe 2 marks for that first sentence, and then another mark for the second sentence, and thereafter it was optional marks that you could have included. So this one here, there was so much you could have written. All you had to basically do was understand the gist of this paragraph, and then just write it in your own words. Obviously, don't lift from the text. I spoke about that in the class where we discussed how to answer comprehensions. But all you have to do for this one here was, this was a higher level question because the language used in here is strong. But if you just said, I'm going to give you an example, right? This is 3 marks. If you just said merely that it's strong language, right? You would have got your 1 mark. And you could have easily pulled out a phrase here. You could have pulled out cultural annihilation or loss to colonization, and you would have gotten 2 out of 3. So I don't expect everybody to be pushing now and spending 15 minutes on a 3-mark question trying to get that 3 out of 3. All you do is, you know your basics. Don't get discouraged when you see a tough, higher level question, because yes, maybe you're not going to get the full 3, but everybody's capable of getting that 2 out of 3. And like I said, rather write too much than write too little, because chances are the right answer is going to be somewhere in there. 1.7. Critically comment on Shriver's hope that cultural appropriation is a passing fad. Right, so let's look at lines 45 to 46. What's the quote? In her address, Shriver commented, I hope that the concept of cultural appropriation is a passing fad, and went on to wear a sombrero, while staking out her claim to do so, and discussing how writers of fiction are entitled to imagine the lives of others. Right, so Shriver is basically almost taking the entire situation for a joke, right? Because they're telling you she's wearing a sombrero, and she's almost mocking the cultural appropriation. So she's not accepting how serious the situation is. She's not aware of the impact that cultural appropriation has on people, because clearly we all know what a big deal cultural appropriation is. This entire article is basically discussing cultural appropriation and telling us how important it is, and showing us how she mocked that and almost didn't understand that. Let's look how the memo worded it. Shriver refutes the seriousness of the concept of cultural appropriation and defends cultural insensitivity. She is unaware of the impact of cultural appropriation and appears oblivious of the disrespect imposed on cultural groups. So this one here, you can see consider alternative responses of Shriver's view. All you had to do was basically, you had to say she's basically almost mocking it. Here they use the word she refutes the seriousness. You could have used, for example, mocking. She doesn't take it as seriously as she could have. And you have to say she's unaware of the importance, like I said, of how important cultural appropriation is. So that one there, I don't think was too tough. I think a majority of you did get 1.7 right. Some of you got 2 out of 3 because you didn't go in depth with your explanation. Like I said, if you just wrote a bit more, they would have given you supporting points for your ones because it says you consider alternative responses, right? So even if your response is not what they're expecting in the memo, if you can make a statement there and you can back it up with 2, maybe even 3 sentences, just backing up your statement, even if you're not writing word for word from the memo and you're even putting a completely different point, as long as you can back it up, you're going to get those marks. And that's another 3 added, right? So I think that's 3 that everyone should be getting. There were some of you that didn't get it in this paper. 1.7 is a question that you all need to look to get right because it's how you support your own argument. 1.8. Is the writer justified in saying if you participate fully and graciously in another culture, to call it cultural exchange means that you are aware of your distance from and relationship to it? Substantiate your answer by making close reference to paragraph 9. Right. So we're going to look at paragraph 9. Typically, the response that you would give for a question like this is normally yes, right? That's what they're usually expecting of you. This memo here, though, did accept yes or no. So let's read paragraph 9. For those who care about culture, cultural appropriation is no passing fad. It is the concept that gives a label to the experience of being from a culture that has been disabused of its power by other cultures who now seek to borrow from it at no cost and with no reverence for history. If it's cultural exchange you want, it's up to you to make every effort to learn as much as possible about the people's history and its artifacts. If you participate fully and graciously in another culture, to call it cultural exchange means that you are aware of your distance from and relationship to it. And if you choose to borrow, hopefully you do so in such a way as to revere the culture and its people and amplify the beauty of that culture with an honest understanding too of its shortcomings, but most importantly, ensuring that members of that culture are seen, heard, and appreciated. That's the difference between cultural appropriation, borrowing, or even stealing from another culture, and cultural exchange, a fairer and more reciprocal transaction. So basically, this entire paragraph here is concluding the point that the writer is trying to make about the differences between the two, right? They're telling us that it's not a problem taking different aspects and showing respect for different cultures. The problem comes when you try and steal aspects from different cultures. So you'll see here, right? They asked us, is the writer justified? And look at, there was 2 options here. I would have usually for these ones, I would say yes, because you can see it's a lot easier to support a yes answer than to support a no answer. You can see the length of the answers here. So yes, the writer is promoting mutual respect between cultures. Keeping a distance from and relationship to it implies your ability to revere, admire a culture without transgressing established boundaries. So all you had to do here to get your 3 marks was you just had to go summarize that last paragraph. That was basically what they were asking you to do. Just say yes, and then explain how the writer is trying to encourage mutual respect between the cultures. And that was it for those 2 marks. Question 1.9. Complete the statement below. Choose the answer and write only the letter next to the question, right? The overall tone of text B is, right? Obviously, we can see here, matter of fact is typically not. I know lots of people wrote B, guys. This is not matter of fact because it's not that they're trying to tell you something that everyone already knows. They're trying to critique something. Throughout this thing, they were critiquing cultural appropriation. So typically, when you critique something, you resent it because you're not happy about it. The word resentful means you despise something, almost, so to say. So the answer here was D, resentful. Quite a few people made that mistake. This one was one that everyone should have gotten. How does the image support the headline, respect or theft, right? Now we're looking at text B, obviously, right? So we're going to go look at text B. Respect or theft. So we're looking at that image there, right? We're seeing a lady wearing an African headdress, right? Or a headdress of another culture. Clearly, it's something cultural and it means a lot to people. So what are they asking us? How does the image support the headline, respect or theft? So respect or theft is a question, right? They're asking us. What they basically telling us is, how does this picture support that? Is you could say by wearing this headdress of another culture, is she showing disrespect to the culture because she's not from that culture and now she's wearing the headdress almost in a mocking way? Or is she showing her admiration for the culture because she's proud of it and showing that she also can display this, right? So let's look at how the memo worded it. almost the exact same, right? By wearing a headdress of another culture, the girl is trivializing a significant artifact or disrespecting that culture or showing her admiration of the culture. So basically, they're asking you, is this picture showing respect for the culture or showing theft of the elements of that culture? That was an easy two. I think a majority of you did get that when I looked at the marks. Makes real indigenous people invisible. Discuss the impact that statement is intended to have on the reader. Right. This was a bit of a longer question, I think. So, cultural appropriation, right. Makes real indigenous people invisible. So, we're looking at this point here. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth point here, right? What are they basically trying to tell us? The statement alerts the reader almost to tell us that the effect of what cultural appropriation is going to do to these indigenous people who the culture belongs to. They almost like you stop noticing them because everyone else, it's celebrities displaying their culture. When you're leaving them behind, when they were the ones who obviously it's their culture, it originated from them. So it's almost so to say there's a bit of irony here because they're using their culture and popularizing it without including them. And the main aspect of their culture is the people. So let's look at how the memo worded 1.11. The statement alerts the reader or creates awareness of the damage caused by cultural appropriation, right? We mentioned that and explained it. The indigenous people became insignificant. So basically, there you have to give a synonym for invisible and explain why. Because when their artifacts are exploited, it is ironic that it is the artifacts and not the people that are celebrated. So again, that comes down, like I spoke about the irony that you're using their parts of their culture, but not including them at all. So how is it fair? So that's basically what they were asking with that question. Right, 1.12, the last one of the comprehension. This comes out in every paper. You guys already know this. It's comparing text A and text B. So for this one here, both text A and text B present a subjective view regarding cultural appropriation. Do you agree with the statement? Justify your response with close reference to text A and text B. As for a question like this, all you're going to do is sometimes they'll tell you in text A paragraph, for example, 3 and 4. This one here, they're speaking about the text as a whole. So you're just going to summarize the whole of text A. You're going to summarize the whole of text B, which is obviously this image here. And you're going to say how they stand for the same thing. So let's look how the memo did it. Yes, both texts are highly subjective in their condemnation of cultural appropriation. Throughout text A, the writer equates cultural appropriation with theft, apologies. So basically, they're trying to tell us that subjective means it's the writer's own opinion, right? Obviously, not everyone sees it negatively. Some people may see it positively and feel that this is good promotion of the culture. So there you say he provides evidence of people in positions of power exploiting cultures for personal gain. That's how he backs up his own point. You can speak about the emotive terms with a negative bias such as demonized and excluded. Those are strong words. Again, cultural annihilation. There you could have used that phrase again. And no reverence for history. He concludes his article by urging the reader to acknowledge and respect the cultures of others. In text B, the writer outlines the consequences, results of stealing someone's culture, trivializes and erases history. Although the headline poses a potentially balanced view, the details reflect the idea of theft. In the writer's view, there is nothing cool, respectful, or fashionable about it. So with questions like this, it's important to quote, make use of the strong language that the writer uses. And like they're telling you here, basically you have to say, all you have to do for this question, guys, the whole of text A looks at cultural appropriation in a negative light. And even though text B is telling you, is it respect or theft? Clearly, when they give these reasons, these are negative reasons. So clearly they see it as theft. And that's, again, showing that both of them have a negative view. And that's the writer's own negative view on cultural appropriation. And that's the comprehension. Is everyone okay with that? Can we just get a thumbs up from everyone? If there's any questions, guys, you can unmute and ask, or you can post it in the chat. Either one, up to you guys. You can message me privately if you want. Completely up to you guys. Are we okay? Can we move on? Okay, I'm going to move on to the summary now. The summary was one of the weaker points in this paper, right? So if you look here, right. So the biggest problem that I found, there was, I think from all the papers that I marked, there was 2 papers that got full marks for the summary, and it's highly unlikely. Usually you see everyone scoring their 10 out of 10 in the summary, especially considering this is an A class. So clearly this was a tough summary, right? A lot of people dropped into zones of 3 and 4 in the summary even because they were summarizing the wrong part of this text. So a key thing is you need to look properly. Summarize in your own words the differing perceptions of strength-based parenting. So many people went to go write about the positives and negatives of strength-based parenting and the effects that strength-based parenting have. That's not what they were asking us for this summary. They were asking us the different perceptions of it. So it's the different ways that people see strength-based parenting. So I'm going to show you guys exactly how I would answer a summary typically in a paper. I'm going to go through it. Obviously, the heading you're not going to summarize, right? That's clearly, you ignore that. When you see something that you know is not a point, go scratch it out. You know that's not included. When you see something that may be a point, you go put number 1 next to it, number 2 next to it, in that order, right? So let's go through this article here. There's convincing evidence to show that narcissism is on the rise, especially in our youth. Does that have anything to do with strength-based parenting? Nope, so that's out. Some researchers say that it is occurring in epidemic proportions. Does that have anything to do? Again, nothing, right? So that's another one out. The inflated ego of Generation Me is reflected in reality TV, celebrity worship, and out-of-control consumerism. Right, nothing there to do with strength-based parenting. So whole of paragraph 1, we out, right? That's not, no points from there. We are correct to be concerned about this phenomenon, but our fear that all children are budding narcissists has caused an unhelpful counter-reaction to approaches that seek to make our children and teens feel good about themselves. Right, there we're saying, what's a perception? A perception is how we see something, right? Here, we are correct to be concerned about this phenomenon, but our fear is how we feel about something, right? So they're telling us our fear that all children are budding narcissists has caused an unhelpful counter-reaction. That's 1 point, because that's how we see it. That's our perception of something, right? So that's point 1 there. You're going to use that point up until probably counter-reaction, I think is where you would probably cut it off. To approaches that seek to make our children and teens feel good, that's not important information. You ignore that. So your key point there is our fear that all children are budding narcissists has caused an unhelpful counter-reaction. That's point 1. According to researcher Dr. Lee Waters, it is common for people to wrongly label strength-based parenting as a recipe for self-entitlement. Is that really the way people see something? Not really so much. That's more how they wrongly label it, right? Actually, if you go back here, you could have even split this other one into 2 points now that I'm looking at it, right? Because another aspect of unhelpful counter-reaction to approach that seek to make our children and teens feel good about themselves, that could have been treated as a completely different point, because feel good about themselves is how the teens feel about themselves. That's almost boosting their self-esteem, so to say. So you could have split that up into 2 points. Your 1 point would have been the narcissistic point. So basically, people believe that all children are narcissists. And the second one, you could have said that strength-based parenting, what does it do? It boosts the children's self-esteem almost. So there was 2 points that you could have already picked up from just the second paragraph. First paragraph had nothing. It is common for people to wrongly label strength-based parenting as a recipe for self-entitlement. Right. That's another belief, right? That's a perception. That's how people see something. So how would you turn that into your own words? That's point 3. You can maybe say strength-based parenting, it's typically believed that it will give rise to narcissistic children, right? Who think that the world owes them. That's all you have to say. You don't have to explain why. You don't have to explain how. It's a summary. You're just saying what strength-based parenting, what the different perceptions of it are. So that's point 3. Their argument seems to be that children who know their strengths will automatically view themselves as better than everyone else. Right. Is that a point? Not really, right? Because it doesn't have, that's supporting their argument, their perception. It's not a new perception. It's supporting the previous perception that we already picked up. It is argued that self-assurance that comes with identifying and using their positive qualities will make children arrogant, selfish, and uncaring. Right. That's clearly another perception. That's how they feel about it. They're saying how they feel. It is argued is a perception, right? It's telling us that's how they argue the point that they're making. So self-assurance that comes with identifying and using their positive qualities. So how would this one be used? Self-assurance that comes with negative self-energy. You could have said here that assertive children are almost, basically they're viewing these children wrong, right? Because they're telling us it is argued that self-assurance that comes with identifying and using their positive qualities will make children arrogant. So they're telling us that they believe what the self-assurance that comes with identifying and using it, they're making the children arrogant. So you need to say that the effect that this has on the children will be that they become arrogant. I'm trying to see if we missed a point here, because you should have typically picked up about 2 points. You're more or less, when you look at this here, we know paragraph 1 has nothing. So paragraph 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 5 more paragraphs. Typically, you're looking at about 2 points from each paragraph. So I'm trying to see where else we could have picked up another point from this paragraph. Okay, let's move on. If we're short of points, we need to remember that we come back to paragraph 2, and that's where we might find more points. I'm showing you guys how we would typically answer somebody, because people answer this one horribly. We look for the complete wrong points. Okay. Why does this occur? It is partly because more is known about narcissism than strength-based parenting. Is that really a point? Not so much, so to say, right? Genuine, oh yes, here's the other point from paragraph 2. Genuine confidence. If we look here, we're looking at this paragraph here, the last sentence of paragraph 2. Genuine confidence about one's strength is categorized as overconfidence. Desirable self-knowledge is branded as excessive self-admiration. That's again another point, right? It's how they're looking at it. It's their perception of strength-based parenting. So you have to say confidence in one ability is seen as a negative trait. Why does this occur? It's partly because more is known about narcissism than strength-based parenting, right? That's not really so much a point. While strength psychology has largely stayed within the confines of academic journals or has been applied only within certain contexts, such as the workplace, research on narcissism has made its way into the mass media. Is there a point? Not so much, right? Because that's not really telling us that there's anything to do with, so to say, you can clearly see that one doesn't have to do with the perception. That's just giving us more information about how it comes, where it comes from. Maybe a point that you could have pulled out here. Desirable self-knowledge is branded as excessive self-admiration. A lot of these points could have been broken down into two separate points. So genuine confidence about one's strength is often categorized as overconfidence. But you could have, if you really run short of points, guys, go look for something like this. This was a really tough summary. Because if you look there, that last sentence, you could have almost split it up into two separate points. You could have put genuine confidence about one's strength is categorized as overconfidence as your 1 point, because that's one belief. And then we can see it separated by a semicolon. So it's almost supporting another one. Desirable self-knowledge is branded as excessive self-admiration. You could have taken it as two separate points. The fear that a strength-based approach will cause narcissism also occurs because we unwittingly fall prey to binary thinking. That's a separate point. We could have worded that one there again. See, this was with this entire article, you just have to look at the different, so it's the different ways that people are viewing stuff, the different beliefs, so to say. A perception is, you could almost define it as a belief in this context, right? So how would you word this one here? We mistakenly believe that one cannot be both confident and humble. So basically, another word that you could use for mistakenly believe, so you're trying to say that the two can't coexist with each other. So maybe you could use the word confidence and humility cannot coexist with each other. That would have been your point there. So we're looking for one more point, right? Because I think we already have 6. And they wanted 7 points total. There's more points in here than the 7 that you needed. All of them will have. Typically, it usually has between 8 and 10 points that you can pull out. This one here was a difficult one and a longer one. And lots of the points could have been split into 2, like I was saying. So I think there'll be about 10 points. I'm not going to lie. I haven't even looked at the memo for this one yet, but I think it's about 10 points, right? Therefore, when we assume that strength focus is the same as self-focus, that's another belief because it's a perception, it's an assumption. We fail to entertain the idea that people who know their strengths are actually more likely to be pro-social and focus on helping others. So here they're telling us we're almost ignoring the fact that strength-based parenting produces better socialized and empathetic children, right? That's another point that you could have written. Then is there anything else there before the end? It is tempting to conclude that every young person is at risk of becoming a narcissist, but there are thousands of young children who are caring, thoughtful, and humble, even when they use their strengths. That there was a separate point that you could have used. You could have spoken about this. So many confident young children who do remain grounded in their situations. So I'll show you guys the memo here. This was a really, really tough, this was the toughest summary I've seen in the past. I went through papers from the past 10 years, and this was the toughest summary. That was why I pulled this one out. If you look here, here's the points that they use. Our fear that our children are budding narcissists is causing unhelpful counter reaction. That was from paragraph 2. You can see it was really difficult points. It's going off the beliefs of the people. But at the same time, the fact that there was 10 points in here, right? If you just identified what they were asking you, many of you didn't read this heading properly here, the differing perceptions of strength-based parenting. So you didn't understand that you had to speak about the different beliefs around self-based parenting and the different effects that self-based parenting can have. And you guys went to go write on, people wrote completely different stuff like, is self-based parenting negative or positive? Instead of just focusing solely on the beliefs that surround self-based parenting. So our fear that all children are budding narcissists, you guys can read through this. Everyone can screen. I'll send this on the group afterwards. I will send this memo out afterwards. But for the summary, each of you made different errors. So the ones that mark the papers, I'm going to give you guys feedback on your paper. If you want, you can even hop on a call with me and I'll explain why you went wrong with the summary. But this was a really tough summary. There was, like I said, from all the papers, I marked 43 papers and there was only 3 people who got 10 out of 10 for the summary. So it was a really, really tough summary. I don't think we'll get something as difficult as this. But if you do, this is basically as bad as it gets for the summary. So for those of you who did answer the paper, I'll give you guys a call and I'll explain to you why you went wrong. Is everyone okay with this? For now. Just get a thumbs up. Okay, do you guys want a break or must I carry on? We still have the cartoon, the advert, and the language to go. Just thumbs down if you want a break, thumbs up if I must carry on. Okay. So now we're going to move on to question 3, right? The summary was the toughest question in this paper by far. I think if you look here at the advert was a really nice one. It was a straightforward one. So they're telling us something about, clearly here you can see it sketches, shape up the way you walk, designed to tone muscles, promote weight loss, and improve posture. So this one here was speaking about, you immediately would see you'd see sketches, you'd think something to do with exercise as a person running. We're going to ignore text E because it's completely separate. We'll go to that afterwards. Let's look at question 3.1. What is the advertiser's intention in the sentence, get in shape without setting a foot in the gym, right? Guys, now, is it realistically possible that someone's going to get in shape without working out? Obviously not, right? So the writer's trying to convince the viewer and the consumer that no effort is required for this. It appeals to people who don't have time to go to the gym, obviously. That's why they're telling us that if you wear these shoes, this is what's going to happen. You don't need to go to the gym. Get in shape without setting foot in the gym. So let's look at how the memo worded it. Yeah, exactly. Like I'm saying, the advertiser's intention is to lure consumers into believing that no effort is needed to get into shape when sketches are worn. When I looked at the answers people wrote for this one, many of the people got 1 out of 2 because instead of focusing on the gym aspect, people were focusing on, everyone just said that they're trying to convince the reader to buy the shoes. Yes, they are, obviously. But you need to explain why they're trying to convince the reader. It's 2 marks. They're not just trying to convince the reader to buy the shoe for no reason. You need to explain what's backing it up. That's why you can see, get in shape without setting foot in a gym. It appeals to the writers, obviously, so to say, laziness almost, the viewer's laziness, because it's the intention to lure consumers into believing that no effort is needed. So if you just wrote that first sentence there, you'd have got 2. Account for the inclusion of personal testimonies in the advertisement. This is in every advertising. Like whenever you get an advert, this is going to come out. All you do when you see something about personal, they're going to say personal testimonies. You always need to say it supports the claims highlighted in the main body. And you can even say, this is a mark that it's not in this memo, but they would have given to you. It acts as proof to make it more convincing. So attest to the effectiveness of the product. There's a point. They carry a sense of real life, which makes this one here any point, as long as it made sense to the specific one. You just have to say that this basically backs it up and assures the viewer that, like, look, this product is a product that's effective because here's real people who are saying it worked. But I think that one wasn't a problem. When I looked at papers, almost everyone had that one right. Comment on the effectiveness of the image used in this advertisement, right? What are we looking at? The image is obviously a leg, right? And they're showing us the leg wearing that shoe. This one here, many people got 2 out of 3. I'll explain why now. The image is effective as it depicts a leg that is in shape wearing a Skechers shoe, which reinforces the name of the shoe, Shape Ups. The leg is an artistic graphic depiction of the writing on the leg, promotes the selling point of the shoe, walking and not having to go to the gym. The shoe, however, is realistically presented. Nobody mentioned this. Everybody's that I marked, nobody mentioned that the shoe is realistically presented and they're showing what the shoe actually looks like in action. So I think almost everyone scored 2 out of 3 because they explained well the effect of the leg and showing the shape of the leg, that you don't have to go to gym because this person's just walking, not going to the gym. But you need to remember, because you can see here clearly, right? This is not a real leg. You guys can see it, it's drawn, but the shoe is a real image of a shoe. And that's where many people went wrong, because you need to say it's realistically showing the shoe. This was more, you just have to pick it up in the paper. Every advert is not going to be the exact same. But like I'm telling you, there was 7 marks. And then there was just 1 question on text E. Text E was obviously about sugar. Comment on the presentation of the phrase as an advertising technique. So like I said, this is in the first class that I explained. All you need to say here, you can speak about font, you can speak about boldness, and you can speak about where it's positioned. I haven't looked at the memo, but I can guarantee you that's what it's going to say. The words have the appearance of being written in sugar, representing the actual product. That was 1 point. The phrase features prominently in the upper segment of the advertisement. There was that. Like I said, it's right at the top. It's big. The choice of font, flowing handwriting. Again, so if you just mention the word font here, you are going to get 1 mark. If you just mention that it's in the upper part, you are going to get another mark. And then obviously you can see here it's written in sugar because that's what they're advertising. So I think this was a very easy advert. Everyone should have scored at least 7 out of the 10. If you're not hitting your goal of 7 in this section here, you need to work more on adverts because this was an easy one. The reason this paper was chosen wasn't for the other aspects. It was mainly that tough summary. Is everyone okay for the advert? Okay. Let's move on to the cartoon. Again, I don't think the cartoon was too bad. When I looked at it, it was a really straightforward one. I think there wasn't really anything that you had to figure out, so to say. So let's just go straight to the questions, right? Refer to frame 1. What does the boy's speech reveal about his attitude towards the tiger? So we're looking only at frame 1. We're looking nowhere else. What does he say? Haha, your clever little strategy has tragically backfired. Look at this jump. Watch and weep, fuzz face. Right. So immediately you're seeing the word fuzz face. He regards Hobbes as he almost sees him as a lower than what he is. So another point that you could have written here was you could have spoken about derogatory language without hatred or malice. Clearly, they see each other as friends because you wouldn't speak. I'm just giving you guys an example, right? You wouldn't speak like this to a teacher, but you would speak like this to someone sitting on a playground with you, for example. So whenever you see something like this, the way you word it is derogatory language. And I think that would have immediately given you your 1 mark. Just check. The text shows Kelvin's attempt for his contempt for his opponent. He refers to Hobbes as fuzz face, right? That was the point that I mentioned. That one was what you would have used to support. He regards Hobbes as his inferior and is condescending towards him. He views him as lower than himself, like I said. It reveals that Kelvin shares an intimate, familiar relationship. You could have spoken the word friendship, they would have given it to you for that, for intimate or familiar relationship. And this creates a comfortable and space safe for him to use derogatory language, right? That's the key point there. So whenever you see a conversation between two friends and they're using almost informal language like this, immediately go write derogatory language. Just give 1 quote and explain it slightly and you got your marks. 4.2. Refer to frames 2 and 3. Discuss how the tiger's reaction to the game is different to that of the boys. Right. So clearly here, we can see the boy is screaming in the first one. He's surprised in the second one, right? And then in the third one, we see him looking down. And you can see there, jump, 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 I win in frame 3. But he's still smiling. He's not screaming over the top like how the boy was celebrating when he was winning in the first one. So basically, we need to speak about the differences between their 2 reactions. So the tiger's name is Hobbes, obviously. Hobbes is calm, and even though he wins the game, he doesn't gloat. Kelvin, on the other hand, is stressed and competitive because we can see by the way he reacts. You can see even here, he's like completely fixated on the game. Here, he's over the moon that he's winning and he's screaming it out loud. So you just have to compare the calmness, basically, to the panic. And that was it. Stressed and competitive versus calm and nonchalant. That was the easy 2 marks. I think everyone got that right when I looked at it. 4.3. Refer to frames 4 to 7. Critically discuss the effectiveness of any one technique used by the cartoonist to illustrate the boy's behavior. Guys, if you see a question like this in the paper, start celebrating because not even asking you of a specific technique. You could have written about anything. You could have spoke about body language. You could have spoke about the font. You could have spoke about the sound effects. You could have spoke about repetition. You could have even just spoken about speech bubbles as a whole, because you can see here clearly, right? There's different speech bubbles in each one. You can see here the speech bubble. It's more, so to say, you can see here it's like almost spiky, so to say, to tell you that he's screaming. Here it's more calm. You can see whenever Hobbes speaks, it's a calm, it's the same speech bubble. It remains constant throughout. His attitude doesn't change. So let's look at how they worded it. Yeah, they're exactly right. There's so many different points that you could have used. Let's look at the different ones. The speech bubble, like I said, the jagged speech bubble in frame 4 conveys his aggression. We spoke about that there. You would have had 3 marks for such a simple thing. This was a free 3 marks. 3 images of Kelvin are included in frame 4 to illustrate clearly. Okay, I didn't pick up on that one. Let's look at frame 4. Yeah, that was a good one also. But like I'm telling you, you don't need to go into these deep points. Whenever they tell you use, like for a question like this, effectiveness of one technique, of any one technique, guys, remember the key techniques: facial language, what am I saying? Body language, facial expressions, and speech bubbles is the key ones that you go with. And I think they spoke about all 3 here. Let's just make sure. Yeah, Kelvin's facial expressions, the gritted teeth and slanted eyes, and the body language clenched first reveal his hostile, accusatory attitude. Everyone in class A had this one, right? So I'm not too worried about that. I know you guys, with the basic ones, you guys are going to obviously get it. There's so many options you could have written here. 4.4. In your view, is frame 10 an effective conclusion to the cartoon? Substantiate your response by a close study of the visual and verbal elements in this frame. Right? This was the higher level question. This entire cartoon was easy, and then they threw 4.4 in there too. This is almost to separate those that are aiming for that 90 and those that are going for a 70, 80. This is the type of question that you need to get right if you want that 90%. In your view, is frame 10 effective, right? Conclusion to the cartoon. Let's look at frame 10. Look, it's just a game. I know. You should see me when I lose in real life, right? So obviously, it's almost a bit anticlimactic, right? Because at the end of the day, they're saying this entire fuss all this year was just for a game. And both characters are saying they know it's just for a game. And throughout, you can see his speech bubbles here. It's that ragged speech bubble. He's screaming here. His facial expressions are over the top here. In this final one, he just sits there and talks with a blank facial expression with a normal speech bubble, telling us like, oh, okay. It was anticlimactic. That was a key point to remember here. I think that was what the memo had. Yes, the final frame is anticlimactic after the emotional flare-up in the previous frames, right? We spoke about that. It's his reaction to everything, the differences between his reactions. After Kelvin's frenzied behavior, he appears to be rational and subdued at the end of the cartoon. His speech is normal, and he's facing Hobbs in a conversational manner. In light of his extreme reaction to losing a game, the reader is left imagining how Kelvin would react to losing in real life. A satirical comment about those who want to win at all costs have been driven home. Yeah, so guys, basically straightforward there. All you had to speak about was how mention the word anticlimactic, obviously, because you can see his reaction here and you can see his reaction in the rest. I think so many people overcomplicated this question when I looked at the way it was answered. People tried to look too much into it when all you had to say was the anticlimactic aspect of it, explain the anticlimactic, and you would have got your 3 marks. So, like I said, I think it was a good advert overall. Cartoon. I think it was a good cartoon overall. People performed well. Almost everyone in this class got about 8 to 9 out of 10. It was a good few 10s also. So this was a good question. I'm not concerned about cartoons. The only thing, like I said in this paper, was the summary that was a bit concerning. Does anyone have any questions on this one? And then just a thumbs up if we can move on and do the last section, the language. Right. Guys, I'm going to rush through the language quickly because the meeting is going to end in 5 minutes. If I don't finish, I'll send out a new link, right? But the language was very straightforward. Corrected error of tense in line 1. Look at the memo there. Published becomes have published, right? Where was that? American researchers just published. Obviously, you can't say they just published. That's the problem. Is this is how we would speak in everyday life, right? But you need to remember, all you had to say here was include the word have. I'm not going to go too much into that because I think everyone was right with that. Remove the tautology in lines 1 to 3. I explained this in my first class that I had about tautology. And if you look at it here, we're going to look at lines 1 to 3, right? The most all-inclusive. Guys, most and all-inclusive already means the same thing. So you can basically cancel out one of them. So the way you had to write this here was the most comprehensive, or you could have just taken out all the most, and you could have said all-inclusive, right? That was your point there. That was the point between the most all-inclusive and comprehensive because they mean the same thing. So you had to choose which one you wanted to remove. You could have either left the most all-inclusive or you could have changed it to the most comprehensive. 5.3, differentiate between the use of the colons in line 4 and 7. Let's look at line 4. Line 4, they solve the mystery of what causes boredom. People feel bored, they concluded, when they're doing their boring things. Right. The colon in line 4 is clearly telling us that it's giving us additional information afterwards because it's explaining to us what the causes of boredom are. Let's look at line 7. I'm sure it's going to be quotation. Yeah. So the colon in line 7, the one that was straightforward, it introduces direct speech, right? I think everyone got that right. Some of you, I'm not sure why people said that this colon here introduces a list. Guys, it's only a list if it's different aspects of like different items. This is not items. They're telling you why boredom is, right? That was for that. Let's look at the next question. The only thing that can exist is an uninterested person. This was one everyone got wrong. Explains how the change in prefix from un to dus changes the meaning of the sentence. Guys, this one here, you need to know the meaning of uninterested and you need to know the meaning of disinterested. Uninterested means you have no interest in something. Disinterested means you're neutral. So you You have a neutral view of something. This one here, I understand it was a tough one, right? Because not everyone knows what disinterested is. But everyone should have got their mark for saying uninterested means having no interest in something. The disinterested one I know is a bit more. Disinterested means you have nothing to gain in it because you have no interest in the situation. So that's why they say it's unbiased or neutral. 5.5.1, identify the part of speech of the underlined word. The underlined word was safety. It's obviously describing a seminar. A seminar is a noun. You guys know that's an adjective. Correct the grammatical error in the sentence. What would the grammatical error here have been? 5.5.2. Improve completely in PowerPoint attending seminars. That obviously it's seminars, it's plural. So you can't say involves. Involves is for singular. So you just have to change involves to involve. Then correct the malapropism. Guys, you know what malapropism is. I explained it in the first class. Which part of it was they asking us for? Paragraph 3. Let's look at paragraph 3. Because there's so much simulation to be had, your forebears were prisoners of mundane tasks. That all depends in contrast with free to choose more exciting. Books. Okay, so it was excess here, right? That was obviously the one here. Because this excess means when, in contrast with free to choose more exciting lives, with excess. This excess here means when there's extra of something. The excess that we're looking for is ACCESS, because that's when you have access to something. And that's what they were speaking about here. Just make sure. Yep, that's right. Replace it in line 18 with an appropriate noun or noun phrase. Let's look at line 18. 1, 16, 17, 18. Time digital second edition. It will make the rest of your life more interesting. So basically they're asking us what will make. Consider stepping away from. All you have to do, guys, was stepping away. That was it. Stepping away will make your life more interesting. So I think this was a good language one. I think everyone performed well when I looked at it. A majority of you were sitting with 8s out of 10s. There was a good few 10 out of 10s. The ones that knew the meaning of disinterested, but a majority sat with 8 because of that uninterested and disinterested question. So this was good. I think I'm going to send out another paper. It's going to be optional again if you want to do it. I'm not going to do a class for the next paper, but I will send it out, as I think the meeting might just end now. So if anyone has any questions, please message me on WhatsApp, and I think the meeting is about to end. But yeah, I hope everyone's okay. If there's any questions, please post it on the group now. Thanks, guys.